Finish what you start, stay on task. There may be no greater measure of your character than evidence that you are a man or woman of your word. Dependability is an invaluable asset in the workplace. It shows ethical honesty. Tip 8. Ignore peer pressure. It is easy to be ethical without the negative influences of others. You can't escape the ethical conflicts with your peers at work. Every job, no matter how isolated, involves working with others. Even the most homogeneous environment will have some level of moral and ethical diversity.
Hello and a very warm welcome. This is the news on NTA International. My name is Justin Abemunye and here are the top stories. National Assembly approves a federal government loan request of $5.5 billion to fast-track infrastructure development. Federal government land clearing program to create opportunities for 70,000 farmers across the country. Plus, Inspector General Police orders a transfer of a case of gang rape and murder of University of Benin female student Vera Omozua to Force Headquarters. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Now, Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has inaugurated a 7-man task team on audience measurement that will help position the broadcast industry on a sound revenue-generating platform. Anthony Forsen reports.
Inaugurating the task team, which has Bello Kankarofi as chairman and Joseph Mutta as secretary, Lai Mohammed said their inauguration heralds a new dawn in the broadcast industry. With the digital switch over from analog television underway, awaiting an accelerated agenda to make it a veritable tool to uplift the creative industry out of the crippling effect of COVID-19, audience measurement, which has remained the missing link in the entire ecosystem, is desirable in making the digital switch over sustainable for digital distributors, channel owners, TV content producers, and advertisers.
Without audience measurement, we will not see the growth in our television and the value creation in the creative industry that the economy and people of Nigeria so much desire. We need an objective and scientific audience measurement system that articulates the value of the content to consumers as well as the value of the audience to advertisers.
The minister noted that the absence of world-class measurement regime has resulted in underinvestment in the sector, which is necessary to foster growth due to advertisers' reliance on audience measurement to assist in advert placements.
The existing model will never enable Nigeria's creative industry to reach its full potential. It stunts the quality of the content that can be created and also limits the capacity of television platforms to invest in dynamic contents that consumers will be attracted to.
The minister decried the lack of proportional value of broadcast adverts despite Nigeria's population when compared to South Africa. He said in 2016, Nigeria's advert revenue stood at $309 million compared to South Africa, which was $1,301 million. Lai Mohammed maintained that there is an urgent need to have a robust return on investment and an overall effect of guaranteed greater spending by advertisers. Similarly, the federal government, he said, is subsidizing signal distribution because channels cannot pay for carriage by their signal distributors who have invested in equipment and transmission. The committee's terms of reference include identifying best practice audience measurement system, recommend a framework for supporting the sustainability of the system, recommend a payment and disbursement framework among key stakeholders in the industry, that is, BORN, Media Independent Practitioners Association of Nigeria, and ADVAN. Chairman of the task team, Bello Kankarufi, expressed gratitude for the honor, assuring that even though the task is Herculean, members of the team will strive to justify the confidence reposed in them. In Abuja, Anthony Forson, NTA News.
Now, coming from the National Assembly, the Senate has approved the external loan request of $5.5 billion by the executive, with emphasis on spending the funds and projects earmarked for it. It has also approved the revised medium-term expenditure framework 2020 to 2022 and the fiscal strategy paper with amendments. This followed the consideration of the report of its Committee on Finance, which recommended an upward review of the benchmark for price of crude oil per barrel from $25 submitted by the executive to $28. Senate also confirmed 37 nominees as chairman and members of the Federal Character Commission, with Dr. Muhiba Farida Dankaka as chairman, while James Gia Kolo is to replace late Daniel James Kolo from Kwara State. It also confirmed the appointment of Dr. Frederick Ekwem and Dr. Jonah Madugu as commissioners for the Federal Civil Service Commission. Meanwhile, the legislators have condemned the killing of Tina Ezekwe in Lagos by stray bullet and Wa Omozua, a first-year university student who was also raped and brutalized by unknown persons inside a church in Benin City, Edo State, as they called for the immediate arrest of the culprit and the provision of stiffer penalties for offenders. In the meantime, the House of Representatives has considered and approved the federal government's 2016 to 2018 external borrowing plan of $22.798 billion, which was forwarded by the President to the National Assembly in 2019. The loan, which was sourced from the World Bank, German Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and China Exim Bank, among others, is for the execution of key infrastructure projects of the federal government. During the consideration, House Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila recalls that the external borrowing plan was last year approved by the Senate but was stepped down for consideration of the House following observations that projects captured were not evenly distributed across the geopolitical zones of Nigeria, as the Northeast and Southeast were left out. This warranted a proviso in the approval following consultation with the executive, which reads that the federal government should, in the next borrowing plan, accommodate the two zones by sourcing funds for the Port Harcourt-Maiduguri rail line. Plenary also featured the passage of the Nigeria Police Repeal and Reenactment Bill, which makes provision for partnership between the police and host communities in maintaining peace and protecting lives and property. Now, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has raised concerns over inappropriate ways of disposing personal protective equipment, PPE, by frontline health practitioners. Chairman of the task force, Boss Mustafa, says they are worried over trending photograph of children wearing PPEs picked up from refuse dump. He says COVID-19 is still virulent, dangerous and infectious.
It must also be understood that every individual has a stake and a role to play. We must take responsibility. We must be accountable to self and community on our actions. we must adhere to the guidelines issued.
Speaking in the same vein, Minister of Health urged state governors to put more effort and take their responsibility of managing the coronavirus pandemic in their states. He says strategies are being developed to ramp up testing for coronavirus nationwide.
All Nigerians to take responsibility for ensuring that we actively play our role in ensuring that COVID-19 does not spike or bounce up, as has been observed in many countries where lockdown was relaxed.
Places of worship must sign up to full compliance with all aspects of non-pharmaceutical interventions required to protect the public from COVID-19, including but not limited to 1, ensuring the supply of running water and soap/alcohol sanitizers at entry and exit points and in all high-contact locations, including bathrooms. 2, worshippers must sanitize their hands before entry. 3, worshippers must have temperature checks before entry, and the supervision and enforcement of this will be led by the leadership of the various facilities.
World Health Organization has warned countries in Latin America to halt easing lockdowns as the pandemic has now reached its peak in the region. Adebola Brooksland Sunday has these and more on Global Update on COVID-19.
Latest statistics by the Nigerian Center for Disease Control reveal that the country now has 10,578 confirmed infections of coronavirus, 299 deaths, while 3,122 recoveries have been documented. So far, 63,882 COVID-19 tests have been carried out by the center. Lagos State tops the list of states with the highest cases in Nigeria, with a cumulative total of 5,135 cases, followed by Kano, Federal Capital Territory, Katsina, and Edo states. Below the ladder are Taraba, Abia, Anambra, Benue, and Kogi states. On the African continent, record published by Africa Center for Disease Control shows that there are now 153,325 confirmed COVID-19 cases, with 64,793 recoveries and 4,356 fatalities. The figures show that South Africa, Nigeria, and Algeria have the highest reported cases on the continent. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has said that the pandemic has not reached its peak in Latin America and warned countries in the region to avoid easing lockdowns. In Europe, Montenegro is due to declare its epidemic over, provided no new infections are reported overnight. It would have gone 28 days without any new case. India's government said it has approved Gilead antiviral drug REMDESIVIR for emergency use for 5 doses in treating COVID-19 patients. REMDESIVIR, which is administered intravenously in hospitals, is the first drug to show improvement in COVID-19 patients in formal clinical trial and is at the forefront of the battle against COVID-19. And a Wuhan state media has reported that a medical doctor working as a urologist at Wuhan Central Hospital has died of coronavirus, making it China's first COVID-19 fatality in the province in weeks. Globally, data published by Johns Hopkins University as at 6:30 p.m. local time show that there have been 6,419,294 confirmed cases and 378,959 deaths since the outbreak began, while 2,941,419 persons have recovered from the disease. I am Adebola Brooksland Sunday.
Now, in compliance with the federal government's easing of the lockdown imposed to curb the spread of the coronavirus, COVID-19, Kano State government has released guidelines and established protocols on how to manage access to markets and locations of economic activity to limit the risk of transmission. The State Commissioner for Information, Malam Muhammad Garba, says in a statement that after due consultations with key public health professionals and critical review of the situation in Kano, markets, places of worship and movement of persons are now allowed on Sundays, Wednesdays and Fridays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. He says Governor Ganduje has therefore summoned an emergency meeting with market leaders on how to ensure strict observance of safety and prevention protocols in markets and business places. The statement further emphasizes that it is necessary for such places to ensure compliance with safety rules that include mandatory use of non-medical face masks, provision of hand-washing facilities and sanitizers, and extensive temperature checks. We now take a short break. The news continues in a moment. Do stay with us.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
You're welcome back. Now, the aviation industry has been witnessing a sharp decline in activities, with revenue nosediving since COVID-19 lockdown. Aviation correspondent Emmanuel Ayimiro takes a look at what happens when airlines are not flying.
Nigeria joined the rest of the world to shut down her airports in March 2020 as part of efforts to contain the spread of coronavirus, a pandemic which has taken a toll on lives, travels and tours, leading to financial crisis in the sector. For instance, the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, FAN, says that chains of activities like the Bureau de Change, car hire, duty-free and other businesses that thrive on passengers' activities around the airport have ceased.
Aircraft are on ground, airport operators are on ground, handlers are on ground, fuelers are on ground. Almost every stakeholder in the aviation industry has been grounded. Our revenue has dropped by 95%. And when you consider that we shoulder a lot of our own responsibilities, especially salaries and pensions, and then we have a huge amount of overhead costs, then technically it's like we are saying this is threatening our very existence.
Already, pay cuts and staff retrenchment had commenced since April by some airlines as the effect of COVID-19 bites on, with some going as high as 80% in staff salary reduction across board, while others stated that 90% of staff should proceed on leave without pay from May 1st, 2020 until further notice.
As planes sit on the ground, they run beers. The only time they rake in money is when they are in the skies. For instance, if this maintenance work that I have said to you that must be done some fortnightly, if they were judiciously and diligently done, then the workforce that were busy doing them would have been paid, wouldn't they?
June 24th is the expected resumption date of local flights in Nigeria, but coping with the COVID-19 protocols for airlines is another hurdle ahead. Emmanuel Ayimiro, NTA News.
And now joining us live again is Godi Ike. He's an aviation expert to look at impact of COVID-19 on aviation and the opening of airport for domestic flights. Mr. Godi Ike, thank you very much for joining us live again.
Oh, thank you, Justin.
Now, COVID-19 and the aviation sector. Let's have your opinion on the general impact of COVID-19 on the aviation sector.
Right. There's no sector in the world that's been so hit as hard as the aviation sector has been hit. As a matter of fact, like I've said before, when airplanes sit on the ground, all they do is run beers. The only time they rake in money is when they're in the skies. So, being on the ground for this number of months, the aviation sector has, worldwide, lost close to $1 trillion in losses, and of course, that's certainly going to be followed by a whole lot of job losses in the sector, and what's more, economy of nations inevitably, have been slowed down because the fastest and the easiest way to move around goods and services is only through the aviation sector. So no economy of the world can do without the aviation sector. It's a big and huge impact.
Okay, you've emphasized so much on revenue loss. Now, do you think the sector can bounce back on time?
Bouncing back would really depend on the kind of financial assistance the sector will receive from various governments. There is no way the aviation sector can truly bounce back effectively without good funding and without canceling some of the bills. For instance, planes that are parked and supposed to be paying parking fees all this period. If they don't have those fees written off, be sure that the debt burden will almost take the airlines to their graves. And so it's important that authorities concerned consider writing off some of the bills that the airlines have accumulated sitting on the ground.
All right. Okay, thank you. Now, looking ahead of the June 21st date for resumption of domestic flights, as an expert in the sector, is the aviation industry ready in terms of meeting the safety protocols put in place by the government?
Oh, well, the aviation sector is a highly regulated sector. What makes sense is that the people involved must ensure that the rules are kept and all the protocols set out are kept. But more importantly, when airplanes also sit on the ground, you find that their airworthiness, becomes challenged, and that means that most of those airplanes will need to have some, maintenance done on them. For instance, if you didn't pack as well as you should have by covering up some of the sensors, ensuring that once every week that you raise the wheels and run them, or tow the airplane up and down the runway, and then checking also the air pressure on the tires, lubricating those landing gear struts to ensure that they are well lubricated. If you don't carry out those services, I can bet you, and of course covering the engine ports,
okay,
to ensure that birds, insects, and some weather action, do not get in there and cause trouble.
Well, thank you very much,
Yes.
Mr. Gordike. Thank you so much for your input on this matter. Thank you for coming on
Thank you.
International.
My pleasure.
Now, that was Mr. Gordy Ike, an aviation expert, on talking on COVID-19 and the aviation sector. Now, moving on, President Muhammadu Buhari is reassuring the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, that Nigeria will stand solidly behind him in his bid to get re-elected for a second term in office. The President gave the assurance while granting audience to Mr. Adesina on a courtesy visit. Our status correspondent Damu Sambu has details.
You are welcome. Thank you very much.
The president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, has been at the center of allegations of impropriety at the financial institution, but was cleared of any wrongdoing by its Committee on Ethics after investigations. However, the United States Department of Treasury dismissed the verdict, calling for an independent investigation. President Muhammadu Buhari, who recommended Dr. Adesina to African leaders in 2015 for the position and worked assiduously for his election, said having lived up to expectations as the nation's ambassador, he will continue to stand by him. He pledged that Nigeria would work with all other African leaders and stakeholders in the African Development Bank towards ensuring that Dr. Adesina's mandate is renewed for a second term of 5 years, given the record of his achievements so far. The African Union had already endorsed the incumbent AFDB president as sole candidate for the continent. The African Development Bank is a multilateral institution owned by African countries, but the United States is a major investor. Giving a background to what is happening in the bank, Dr. Adesina explained that all the 16 allegations raised against him were trumped up and without facts, evidence, and documents as required by the rules and regulations of the financial institution. He said calls for fresh investigations by the United States after the Ethics Committee of the bank cleared him of all the allegations and upheld by the governors of the bank were against the rules. Dr. Adesina said having been exonerated, any other investigation would amount to bending the rules of the bank to arrive at a predetermined conclusion. The motive, he said, is to soil his name and that of the bank. The FDB president described as a thing of pride being a Nigerian and thanked President Muhammadu Buhari for robustly supporting him all along. He used the opportunity to commiserate with the president on the death of the former Chief of Staff Abba Kyari, describing Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the new Chief of Staff, as a man of integrity and of global standing. From the State House, Adamu Sambu, NTA News.
We now turn to security matters, where the federal government has directed the police to unravel the circumstances surrounding the gang rape and murder of a female student of the University of Benin, Vera Waila Omozoa, in Benin, and the serial sexual abuse of a minor in Jigawa State by 14 men, with a view to bringing these perpetrators to justice. In a statement issued by the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, bringing the perpetrators of the heinous crimes to justice, the federal government will be serving a strong notice of its total aversion to gender-based violence in whatever form. The minister described the gang rape and murder of Miss Omozua in Edo State as a cruel and barbaric act that offends human sensibility, in addition to being antithetical to decency, saying no society will tolerate such depravity. He also said the serial sexual abuse of a minor by 14 men in Jigawa State is not only repulsive but highly condemnable. Meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has ordered the immediate transfer of the case to the force headquarters, Abuja. The IJP's directive is sequel to the preliminary report from the team of investigators and forensic experts earlier deployed to assist the Edo State Police Command in the investigations into the unfortunate incident. The DIG in charge of the Force Criminal Investigation Department, DIG Anthony Ogbizi Michael will henceforth provide direct supervision and ensure speedy and thorough investigation of the case. In a similar vein, the IGP has ordered the immediate deployment of specialized investigators and additional investigation assets to all the gender desks offices and the juvenile welfare centers across the country. And this is where the news ends on NTA International. Thank you very much for being a part of it. My name is Justin Bemunyi.
Away. You can watch NTA International live on your TV, computer, iPad, tablet and phone. Log on to visiontv.co.uk and click on Entertainment, then NTAI. You can also download the iOS or Android app on your mobile devices to watch